Hi, good afternoon and welcome to day 2 of the 2021 Fall Data Users Meeting. My name is Joe Parsons. I serve as chair of the Ag Statistics Board and will be serving as your moderator for this session. We're glad you're able to be with us today. Just a few reminders, some of these you've heard before. We're offering closed captioning for those who find it difficult to hear the discussion. You'll find the closed captioning on the ribbon at the bottom of the screen. As we've done in the past, recordings, slides, and the Q&A transcripts will be available on our website after the meeting. In the reminder email you have from my colleague Marissa Ruber that you received earlier this week, you should have received an attached file with the highlights of activities at each of the participating agencies here today. Our panelists covered that material yesterday briefly, or at least advertised it, but you may want to take a look for reference and that may inspire some of your questions. As I mentioned yesterday, if we have some unforeseen event or technical problem occurs, we'll try to deal with it quickly. If we're unable to remedy the issue and need to end and restart, we'll communicate with each of you via your email from the registration, likely with a new link to resume the meeting. Hopefully this won't be necessary. There'll be an additional breakout session later this afternoon. To join those meetings, you'll need a different link than the one we're using right now. Those links are in your registration email, and we'll post them in the chat before we end this session, and I'll make another comment of that at the end. Speaking of questions, at the bottom of the screen on the ribbon, there's a Q&A button to post your questions. There's also a chat window we'll monitor for technical issues and post links to files and such as needed. There's also an option to raise your hand if you're having difficulty and we can try to help. If you're having difficulty, you may also want to email Marissa and Vincent at the email address shown on the screen. Marissa and Vincent will be helping me monitor all of those streams. By the way, if you have a colleague that would like to join at the last minute, Marissa or Vincent can also help with that. We will plan generally to answer the questions posed verbally, as we know some participants are listening and not viewing the screen. It's very helpful if you'll include your name with the question. We've pulled forward questions submitted via email that were not addressed yesterday, and any questions from the breakout that did not appear to get answered. We'll answer all the questions we have that we're able to get to in our time limit, and we'll post answers to all the questions with the transcripts. So a little bit late, so yesterday, just as a reminder, AMS presented on their ag transport platform, World Board, FAS, and Census presented on their activities. The later breakout session yesterday afternoon included talks on the NASS milk production program, and ERS highlighted some of their data and information on their new initiatives. All these sessions are now online for your later viewing, and we'll throw a link in the chat, but that we also sent you an email this morning if you're a registrant. Later today, after this general session of Q&A, you can sit in on a discussion of the 2021 Western Drought by World Board meteorologists, or sit in on the AMS Market News session. Our last session today will be a choice between NASS modernization or with FAS on its global agricultural and disaster assessment system. As it was yesterday, we'll conclude today's program at 3 p.m. So the breakout sessions are a little shorter than they were yesterday. With that, I think we're ready to get down to some questions, and let's see what's in the Q&A. I already see some in there, so that's good. So we'll get going. I'll read them off again because we have a number of folks that are probably listening and maybe not looking at their screen. So if you will, give me the chance to read the question, and I'll try to throw it around to the right person. And if I miss, I want my panelists to make sure and let me know that they've got something to add. So the first question out of the gate is going to go to Mike Walter at FSA, and the question is from Jerry Goodell. Mike, when is FSA going to release its October sign-up data? So the 578 reporting data that you all have been releasing monthly in the afternoon after crop production and WASDE. Jerry's looking for when you guys will be able to post.
All right, thank you, and good afternoon to everybody. It's kind of an odd answer, but any day now. There was work going on behind the scenes to do a little data validation and how we pull that report together, and how we consolidate it and roll it up to the state and county crop level. So that's actively being worked on. So I honestly anticipate any day now, and within the next couple of days, first couple of days of next week, that'll be able to be out there.
Okay, thanks. Second question, also, Mike, you're got you in the hot seat here, and we talked about this a little bit just before. This came from the breakout section on milk production, and so I hope we interpreted the question properly. This was from Laurie Showers. I'm interested in the overhead for dairy producers. That has changed to being only published twice a year, May and October, I believe. Are there plans for that to be more frequently generated? And I made an assumption that that was for FSA's farm program, but perhaps that belongs to ERS. So anyway, I'll put it out there. And Mike?
So I'm not 100% familiar with that report, so I'd honestly have to go get back to our analysis and policy staff, see if it's a product that they're doing, and then be able to provide a better answer at that time. Or call not it if it's not our agency, and get it redirected to the right person.
There you go. So we can follow up on that. And Laurie, if you want to post another question that follows up, if we got that wrong, we'll take another stab at it here in a little bit. All right, I'm going to go to Lance with this one. We're going to talk about grapes for a second. The last NASS acreage variety survey of New York grapes was in 2011, and the annual tonnage estimates were discontinued in 2018. Are there plans to reinstate this vital resource for the New York wine and grape industry? Lance?
Sure, and thanks for that question. I know that's a topic that's been discussed really several times over the last year. At this point in time, we do not have any intentions of specifically adding New York grapes back into our annual program. We are continuing to look for some of that correspondence that I know you had asked about, Tim. So we're continuing to dig into that side of things. But no, as of right now, there's no specific plans to make that addition.
All right, thank you. Next question's from Bill Lapp. I know we've had a number of conversations around CARES, and this question is from Bill on renewable diesel. Renewable diesel has become an important part of U.S. soy oil demand. Within the CARES data, is it correct that USDA does not measure inventories, that is stocks, of soy oil held in RD plants? How can we begin to capture this critical piece of data? I'll go with Lance on that.
Yeah, I'll take that one. So I want to dig into that one just a little bit more and provide a written answer back on that, because I believe we do have some of that reported there, but I'm not sure it's complete. And so we'll get a much more detailed answer to you specifically on that in the transcript.
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody, I think longtime participants are well aware of this, but we will post the transcript, and we will, any questions that we don't have a complete answer to, we'll complete that answer there. And if we know your name, we'll try to get back to you directly, but you know, check back on the transcript. A question from Paul McCullough. Question is for USTR. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe Paul, I might have you write some more there. I'm going to let that one go for now, but tell me more. I don't know enough to direct that question. This is from Ken Lovett. If FSA is having to validate the latest updates from their crop acreage data, how is this data used for NASS's interpretation for the October release? For that matter, I guess for the September release. I don't know, Dan or Lance, do you want to address this?
Yeah, I can take that one. I'm not going to speak to details for FSA, but I can tell you that the data validation issues that they're looking at don't impact the crop totals for things that we're reporting in our crop production report. It has to do with some other categories of crops, so it should have no impact on the data that we used for incorporating into our acreage estimates in either September or October.
Okay.
Is that an accurate statement, Mike? You comfortable with that?
Yes, I agree. The little issue we found was on non-crop land for a non-covered, non-commodity crop.
Next question, probably I'm going to look to I'll start with Mark Jekanowski and then maybe go to Patrick on, and if others need to get in on it. This one is Paul finished his question. So Paul asked, what exact tools does USTR have to enforce China to meet all of their phase 1 obligations? So this is the trade pact now from a year and a half or so ago.
All right. Thanks, Joe. And I'd have to say, I honestly don't know off the top of my head. Maybe FAS might have some ideas on that, or if any of our board chairs have, have any thoughts on that, they might chime in. But I'd have to say I don't know off the top of my head exactly.
Mark, this is Patrick.
Yeah.
I would say that that's really more of a trade policy question in that trade policy space.
Right.
And, we're focused here on data. So I think Mr. McAuliffe might want to reach out to USTR directly for, an answer to that question.
Right.
Okay.
Good idea. Completely agree. Good.
Yeah. And there may well be a document that details just that when they do at the USTR. This next question's from Benjamin Diamond. What's the difference between how NASS and RMA estimate yield data? Are RMA yield estimates used for certain crop insurance policies? I'm going to start with Dan Crestis and Lance, and then I don't know, I would suspect that we've got some RMA team in the audience, and we can bring them in if we can. So Dan or Lance?
Well, in basic, NASS is going out and doing a survey. We're collecting our information that way from producers. I don't want to speak out of line for RMA, but I would assume that they are asking farmers to come in and report their yields. But Lance, you might have more details on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first point I would make is that RMA doesn't estimate yield. So that's one difference right there, is RMA does collect yield information from producers who purchase insurance products. And so, yes, they have yield information available. They don't publish estimated yields at any county, state, or other level. They just report what's reported to them through the insurance agents who collect that information. In terms of how that information can or cannot be used in conjunction with the NASS estimates, really the biggest issue there comes down to timing. Most of that yield information that RMA gathers doesn't get reported until after the season. And so once that data is even available to RMA, it's typically after NASS has published our final estimates for the season, including our final county level estimates. So there's really a big timing factor in terms of being able to utilize the data that RMA has available on yields in the NASS estimating process.
If we have an RMA person in the audience and you would like to make an additional comment, if you raise your hand, Marissa can promote you to where you can speak. But we'll go on for now, and we can come back to this if one of our RMA colleagues are available to speak. Next question also kind of comes back to the FSA information. Given the delay in the FSA October crop acreage data to the public, I think were the data also delayed to NASS. Was updated FSA data able to be considered in the October crop production report? Dan or Lance? Lance?
Yes, NASS has access to that data in real time, so it had no impact on our ability to access the information we needed.
Well, yeah, and we do have just a great working relationship with FSA and the team there, and yeah, we have a connection. We get that data in real time. All right. For Dan or Lance, Did NASS make any adjustments in their ag yield survey model after last year's experience when producers misjudged their potential early, only to find yields disappoint in the end? So I think this is referring to our revision on corn near the end of the season. Which one want to start, Dan? You want to give that one? We'll give that one to Lance.
I noticed he wasn't coming off mute, so I assume I'll answer that one. Well, the short answer would be no, we didn't make any changes to our methods or procedures, but I can tell you that as part of our analysis process every year, when we look back at history, we look back at previous years, we identify what I would guess, for lack of a better term, is the word anomaly. And so we're not necessarily making the assumption that what happened last year is going to be the case this year. Obviously, what certainly appears to be the case last year is that producers were surprised at the end of the season with where their yields came in. And looking back at the data that we typically collect monthly from producers, that doesn't normally happen. And so at this point, we have no reason to assume that that's a new thing that's going to happen every year. And so we're kind of assuming business as usual again this season, and that producers have the normal handle on what their yields are looking like that they would have had in most other years.
And I'll just add to that fact that what Lance alluded to was that when we're looking at the yields, we're looking at a series of yields over 10 years and over 15 years. And so we're taking all that into account. How last year came out to the final, that all figures into how we set our estimates. So actually what happened last year really is a beneficial thing for NASS, because it allows us to build in for outliers, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think one of those things, just to add a quick point, is that not only do we look at the last 10 or 15 years, but we also think about analog years, right? Is there another year out there that sort of looks like the one that we're seeing in front of us now, and what might be learned from that, right? And so that's definitely one that last year and the end of the season run out will be one of those things that is now in our collective memory. I'm gonna run down to Karen Braun. Karen from Reuters, question for FSA. Could you please comment on the acreage registration data leak that occurred on September 8th? I'll say that as that's her words. How did it happen? Has anything been done since then to prevent this from happening in the future? Also, thanks for eventually posting it later that day and making sure everyone could see it before the Friday report. Mike, are you able to comment on that?
I have no comment. I don't have enough background on there to make a comment.
Okay. That is one of those, I'm sure that we can get some more comments for that in the transcript. Thanks, Karen. I have some comments from Paul, but I don't really see a question. Paul McCullough, I don't really see a question there. He's commenting that the U.S. Trade Representative said a week or so ago that the USTR would enforce China to meet its Phase 1 agreement on U.S.-China trade agreement from last year. Okay. Going on to a question from Bill Lapp. Census revises monthly exports in a 13-month report following June, July. Getting this data correct, but in a very timely manner is especially important in years of a tight supply demand. For example, 2021 U.S. soybeans. Would USDA consider deviating from adherence to census as their source of export totals, especially when FAS and AMS export data are similar but in disagreement with census? This has particularly important implications for the adjustments USDA NASS makes to September 1 soybean stocks and final soybean production. I'm going to start with Mark, and I don't know if you want to make comment and your maybe some of your chairs.
Yeah, I think I'd probably kick that over to maybe Keith. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure, Mark. Bill, thanks for the question. That's a good question. Something we think about a lot, and we do review use data with NASS at the end of the marketing year. So we do try to provide the best data that we can so that they have accurate data to look at going into the end of the marketing year. In your suggestion, we track all of the different sources of data for trade, and this particular year your observation is correct in regards to which pair happened to track the closest inspections data and the export sales data this year. But if you track those over time, there's no consistent pattern to which is the most paired up, if you might say, or in agreement. So I think it would be something to maybe consider over a long period of time if there was a little bit more consistency to a pattern. But at this point, if we were to switch data sources, not only would my phone ring to the point where I'd have to probably hire someone else to help answer it, we also wouldn't know for sure that we were on a better track for reporting exports. So I think I would just close by saying we do go over all the sources with NASS and talk about when we have a year like this where inspections and census are more out of line than they usually are. I'd be pretty cautious about switching data sources, but there's nothing to say though that we have to use census as our source for exports and imports.
Joe DeCampo, I don't know if you have any, if you want to make comment on this topic.
Sure, I can say a little something. Our release is always it's like a triumvirate, right? It's us and it's Stats Canada and it's the Bureau of Economic Analysis. So we really can't put forward corrections more than once a year because it takes a lot of effort even to just do it once a year.
Okay, thanks for that. And I don't know, Lance, I think Keith covered it pretty well, but did you or Dan have anything to close this one out? Okay. Jerry Goodell, any ideas to improve U.S. grain stocks that have had some dynamic changes from the initial posting? Where have the changes been coming from, and any ideas how they might be improved going forward? Lance, I'll let you start that one out, and I don't know if Dan may want to kick in a little bit on that too. We've got some efforts going on there.
Yeah, and so I guess a couple of things I'll say. First of all, the question refers to changes from initial posting, so I take that to mean revisions. Generally speaking, if you go back to the previous year, we did have some fairly significant revisions that happened in a couple of quarters, and we had a lot of conversation about that in the last couple of data users meetings. But over the course of this past marketing season, we really didn't see any significant revisions happening on an ongoing basis, and so I think that's kind of calmed itself down. If the question is referring more to changes in ending stocks when we get to the end and NASS is actually measuring them versus what was forecasted in the WASDE leading up to that point, that's a completely different conversation. I don't think that's where the conversation was going, but if it is, I'd probably defer to my friends over at the World Board to talk about that aspect of things. But those changes would simply be, again, based on the fact that up until NASS measures the ending stocks, it's going to be forecast based on external conditions and an analysis of what it looks like is going on, as opposed to when we get to the end of the marketing season and NASS actually collects that information from both the commercial facilities and the producers holding the stocks on the farm. The only other thing I would mention is that when it comes to grain stocks, just a reminder to folks that NASS is in the process of a complete review of that program. that's been going on for most of the last year. This first year, we spent time really doing a deep dive into gathering information, reviewing the entire program. So as of right now, we're in the process of putting all of those pieces together, identifying any recommendations for changes moving forward. Over the next several weeks, we'll probably be focused on prioritizing some of those recommendations and identifying what items we might need to take action on moving forward. And again, just as a reminder, if there are any significant changes coming in that program before we would implement them, we would make sure everyone is made aware of those changes before they come into place.
Thanks, Lance. This is Paul McCullough. Why is it that the China attaché uses 30 million metric ton corn imports from this past week and WASDA used 28 million metric tons? I'm guessing that would go to Mike Jewison.
Yeah. Mike, are you on?
I'm here. Thanks
Yeah.
for the question, Paul.
Sure.
We actually addressed this a little bit yesterday in the breakout session, the foreign the production and trade session, but I'll just reiterate what I said there. And if you want, you can go check out the video on YouTube too, or read the transcript. But the short answer is timing, data sources. We don't control what the attaché does. It's one piece of information. And I think this has come up in a couple of different meetings that we've had recently, either the past data users meeting or two before that. But the final import data source that we're trying to forecast to in the case of China corn imports is what China Customs says the corn imports were. So appreciate the question. Thank you.
Here's a question. It's actually focused on RMA. Mike, you might know the answer. Is RMA's county level yield / production data available for download? Now, I know that the RMA's book of business is available for download. I am not certain on the status of the county level yield data. It would be delayed. It probably would. I think it is most complete by about August or so, reflecting the prior year. But Mike, do you know if the county level yield production data is made visible to the public?
I believe it is, because I know that we rely on that data at FSA at our county office level for some of our programs, and they're always sending me questions about it. So it is out there on their website.
Okay, and in the transcript, we'll hunt that down and get a link then. This is a question from Bill. This is through the NASS September 30 adjustments. The U.S. soybean balance sheet table appears to be managed, in air quotes, each year to avoid a significant negative residual term for the entire preceding crop year. If true, why is the same methodology not used for U.S. canola or for U.S. wheat by class? Lance?
Yep, I'll take that. So that's actually one of the topics that's being discussed and considered as part of our review that we've been working on for the last year. And so that's something that we'll be addressing one way or the other here in the next upcoming cycle.
Thanks. Next question's from Paul McCullough. And you could go a lot of directions with this, Mark Jekanowski, but what will WASDE do in 2021/22 to improve their forecasts each month?
All right, thanks. Yeah, that's a good question. Look, I think the bottom line is that we're always putting the department's best resources and best efforts toward putting these forecasts together every month. It's always a learning process. We're always striving to improve, always striving to do better, and we'll continue to do that. Every year is unique. Every month is a new set of challenges, and I think overall, if you look at the track record, it's been strong, and we're always striving to improve it, and we'll take all steps necessary to always do the best job we can.
Thanks, Mark.
Sure.
I'll mention this one real quick and then we'll move on. This is from Matt Clark. My Hawaiian ranchers are not eligible for RMA PRF insurance. Are there RMA contacts I can work with to help coordinate the need for this product? Mike, part of FPAC, I know that RMA does a lot of outreach, and we can surely get you some names to reach out. I know I think it's the Pacific Northwest region maybe covers Hawaii. But Mike, do you have anything further?
No, we can follow up and get you the names of who's the best person to contact.
Yeah. Yes, after the September grain stocks report, several analysts and reporters stated that soybean stocks were well above expectations because NASS revised its 2020 production estimate higher. Is that an accurate statement, or are soybean production revisions at the end of the marketing year based on survey-based ending stocks estimates and known usage? Dan or Lance?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Thanks, Chris. I actually appreciate that question because I read a lot of commentary after the report about this as well. And I think there is a bit of a misconception out there that getting this in reverse. And the reality is that we get to the end of the marketing season, we do a survey or 2 surveys to measure the ending stocks. And when we find that last piece of information, those ending stocks, we do have all the usage for the year. We've got all the inputs going into the year and everything. And so as a result, that's what really drives the production change back to the beginning of the season, because now we see what's truly left in the bins. We know what the measured usage is, especially for a crop like soybeans, where almost everything is measured. And as a result, it dictated a need for us to revise that production feeding into the crop season. And so that's the driver. It's the ending stocks driving the revision to the production, not the other way around.
And the way I kind of think about it is that, every number in a balance sheet has some uncertainty about it, right? And it becomes less if we're talking about export data and stuff like that as you get through the year, right? But, as we think about the uncertainty that we have available in different areas, that's, how we think about, where we're going to set an estimate and then also where we might choose to make a revision.
Joe,
Yeah.
Just to add to that, the process that Lance mentioned, that hasn't changed. We've been doing that for years, and so that isn't anything new or anything that we needed to tell folks about. It's been done that way back when I did soybeans in the 90s, so no change.
Actually, you guys can see in the Q&A here now, Lori followed up, Lori Showers, on the milk cost of production. It was an ERS piece. So Kelly or Spiro, I don't know if you have anything to say, but it says, here is the link to the milk cost of production estimates. I should have used that term instead of overhead for dairy producers. The data were released in 10/1/21. The next release date is 5/2/22. So I don't know if you guys have any comment now, or if you want to come back in the transcript on that.
Yeah, I think Jeff Gillespie is on here, and I think that might be one that he might be able to address. Jeff?
I can address that one.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laurie, for clarifying the question. And I believe you were asking were you asking about when it was released? I believe that was the case. And we do release the milk cost of production and the commodity cost of production estimates twice a year, in May and in October. We don't release it more often than that. But we will have 2021 estimates released in the May release that's on the calendar. I think you have the right date there. So thanks for the question.
Here's a question again for ERS and focused on from Ben Diamond, focused on China agricultural and economic data located at an ERS web link is no longer being updated. Why has it stopped being updated? Will it be updated in the future? So I don't know, Spiro, Kelly, or Jeff.
I'll get a stab at that. We can provide a fuller response than in the transcript. We'll look into it, but we lost a lot of staff over the last couple of years and are rebuilding, and that could be one of the reasons why that's one of the products we haven't been updating. But we'll get back to you with a fuller response in the near future.
Thanks, Spiro. This is from Jerry Goodell. Do you think that the 2020 low grain moisture was a factor in the January drop in corn yields last year?
Maybe. I wish I knew exactly what the cause was, but I can't say that definitively. I would say that is a possibility, certainly, but I'm sure there's other possibilities out there as well.
I think that's a good point. Sometimes, we might be asked why. There are some things, we try not to get out past what the data are available to tell us. And in that particular case, I don't think that we have collected data that would say something about why to that point. This is for Patrick, I think, again from Benjamin Diamond. The FAS PSD database has data at a geographic level of country, but not state or province. Why not? Will data at the level of state or province be included in the future?
Good question. The PSD database is really structured around national data. And of course, everyone knows, all of the production estimates we have in there are official USDA estimates that have gone through the interagency commodity estimates process with input from the World Board, ERS, and FAS. And there would be, I think, no way to have committee blessed estimates for every province and state in every country around the world. So I just don't think it's possible or feasible with the way that the database is structured. And when we publish PSD data, it is the official USDA estimates, and there's no way we do provincial level estimates for all the countries that are covered. So we do use provincial level data in our work, obviously, to arrive at the country estimates. And our folks in IPAD that are estimating crop production for FAS has access to a lot of that data. And, it's a great tool for us, but I don't see any way in the future of actually publishing it within the PSD database.
And Patrick, you guys have some remote sensed products, right? That one might be able to get a sense of in one area of a country or another, that gives a little bit of at least a flavor of where there might be a crop problem or the vegetative health of crops in different areas. True.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. We have on our iPad website, we have a lot of resources that look at crop production and crop progress and crop conditions around the world. This afternoon, we'll be doing a breakout session highlighting our GADIS system, where mostly or almost all of the remotely sensed information that we're using as a tool is available to the public through the GADIS system if they want to follow that, to look at crop conditions, drought conditions, rainfall, moisture data, you name it, we have it there within GADIS. So I think the iPad website is a great resource. GADIS is a great resource you'll hear about this afternoon. So a lot of good information out there that we have from FAS.
Yep, and Robert on your team just posted that to the chat. So don't leave the discussion, but you can bookmark that for later. All right, next question. This was from Sam Funk at the Iowa Farm Bureau. Hi, Sam. We have census engaged in this meeting with data provision. Could we also have EIA engaged with the importance of soy oil data and biofuels? Well, it just so happens And Mr. Mike Connor from the Energy Information Administration is in the lower left corner of my screen. And Mike, I'll let you come off mute and see if you have something to say.
Well, hi, and thank you for having me. Yeah. I mean, EIA has been engaged in collecting soybean oil for biofuels for a while now, and I'm here if there's a question.
Okay. And I know you guys have been doing some work around your survey programs in the recent past. So, Sam, I don't know if you wind up having a follow-up question, where we'll hopefully get to it on down the road here. This question's from Karen Braun at Reuters. Lance, I think you've already touched on this, but I'll see if you have anything to add. Can you please describe the process that recently led to the conclusion that the 2020 soybean crop was 81 million bushels larger than previously stated? Is it simply the remainder after collecting the September 1 stocks, export and crush data, or is there some actual reevaluation process of the production components?
Yeah, and as I said earlier, it is really, once the marketing season's complete, you get the ending stocks, you've got all the components of the balance sheet. That's what drives us to look at potential revisions to production. So that's the driver. But I would go on to say that when we look at whether or not to make those revisions, that we do look at the components of the production estimate, and we do reevaluate that based on all the information that we had. There's always some level of precision around all the data that drives those production numbers to start with. And so any adjustments we make there are still going to be within the bounds of the data that we have to set those estimates with. So it's not that we just blindly adjust that production by whatever number we think is going to make the balance sheet look good. We actually work all the numbers together, make adjustments as needed within the bounds of the data that we have to arrive at the best fit overall.
Perfect. Thanks, Lance. This is from Ryan Nielsen with Brugler Marketing. This question's for World Board, although I'm thinking Patrick may want in here too. Yesterday, we were discussing CONAB and StatsCan influence for estimating crop S&Ds. A comment was made. NASS is the gold standard, then a few countries are close, then a sharp drop-off. My question is there a similar organization in China? Where does USDA get data from in estimating China ag S&Ds, and how reliable are the data?
All right, well, let me jump in on that one. And I will probably turn this over to Mike. That was actually Mike's quote in there about NASS being the gold standard. And
thanks, Mike.
Yeah,
that's not hyperbole. That's not hyperbole. That's the truth, Joe. You know that.
So yeah, Mike, if you can fill us in a little bit about China data sources and NBS and whatnot, that would be great.
Sure. Great question. Thanks for the question. I would say for the grains and oilseeds in general, the National Bureau of Statistics for area yield production is a key source for us. In addition to that, there are quasi-governmental sources, in particular the one that's got the most longevity and most reliability as far as China goes would be the National Grains and Oilseeds Information Center, or NGOIC. Unfortunately, they only do their reports, as far as I know, in Chinese, but certainly a lot of useful information that they put together. So those would be, I would say, the two key sources that we would look at on the grains and oilseed side, and also, I guess, for wheat too. So.
Okay. Next question is from Jerry. This year's bean ending stocks has prompt a negative residual of 3 million. How does this happen? Lance? I'm not exactly sure of the question. I don't think we had a negative residual.
No, we do. If you look at the WASDE from this week, you'll see there's a 3 million negative residual. But we have to kind of go back to the conversation from a little while ago about the issue with exports versus inspections and when the opportunity is for those revisions to be made. And I think there's an expectation that there could be a revision coming to soybean exports when the next window opens up that could very well take care of that negative residual.
Gotcha. I misunderstood the question. I thought Jerry was referring to the past marketing year. No, I got it now. Thanks. This goes back to probably soybeans. Joe Kleinman, at the end of the season, NASS has to choose whether to revise production or stocks. Why do all the revisions seem to fall on production when NASS has no new survey information on production? Couldn't the revision be spread to both production and stocks, especially soybeans in the September 30th report? Lance?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing I'll say is that ending stocks are happening in real time. So any adjustment we make there, you're not going to see as revision because it hasn't been published yet. And so when we're setting those ending stocks numbers at the end of September, we have the complete balance sheet at that time. So any adjustment that needs to be made to the stocks level at that point, we're making before you ever see the number. Now, with that being said, if you think about soybeans in general and you think about the magnitude of revision that was necessary and look at the quantity of stocks that were remaining at the end of the year, there's simply not enough stocks left to make all of that adjustment in the stocks total. We would literally have to make an adjustment larger than the data would support. And so it clearly points to the fact that there was a production revision also needed in conjunction with us considering how we would set those ending stocks relative to the data that we collected on the surveys that feed that process.
Next question's from Brad Fuller. Is NASS still releasing charts, graphs on implied ear and pod weights for corn and soybeans? Lance?
No, we haven't for a couple of years, and those were charts that we used to include in the executive briefing package that we post on the website and share with the secretary or secretary's designate in the briefing. And basically the reason that we stopped doing that is because there was a lot of confusion around those. We actually had a lot of folks who would misinterpret how those what those charts were saying. And so we chose to present the similar information in a different format in those slides. But if anybody's interested in recreating that same information, you can either go back to the previous briefings that are posted on our website. The formula to calculate those values was posted at the bottom of those slides. It was literally just a mathematical function based on information contained in the report. So you can easily recreate those yourself, or if you're having trouble finding that, you can reach out and we'll absolutely provide those formulas for you.
Next question is from Karen Braun for World Board. Can you comment on what factors you are seeing in China that would keep the 21-22 imports fairly close to 20/21? In most other outlooks, including the one from the attaché, sees much bigger year-on-year decline in Chinese corn imports than USDA is projecting. For imports, she's referring to the Chinese corn imports.
Mike, you want to take that?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Karen. To simplify, I guess, the answer here, there'd be two components. I would break it apart into an economic calculus, our view that there will be supplies available for exports in the two primary suppliers for, at least as far as corn is concerned, for China's corn imports, the United States and Ukraine, and that the economics will be there for the imports. And then secondarily, there's also, as we've seen recently, a political calculus and what one could loosely characterize as a comfort with import program. And our assumption is, given the most recent year, we've seen comfort with a large import program, obviously the largest importer of corn in the world now. We expect that to continue.
Okay, thanks. This is kind of a follow-up from Lori Showers on our question about the milk production, cost of production. She was specifically asking if that could be published more frequently than the every 6 month periodicity. I don't know, Jeff or Kelly.
I can respond to that. Yeah, we used to update those data monthly, and we had monthly milk cost of production estimates, and we didn't really have. We felt we discontinued doing that in 2018. we just didn't have the sufficient data to be able to continue doing that. And so we discontinued it really at the urging of a data review that we had. In order to release this more frequently, we'd have to look at what data are available and kind of have to look at it and see if we could be confident in that type of and more frequent releases. But yeah, at this point, we're just doing the twice a year releases, and they are just for annual, just to provide the annual releases on cost of production.
Got it. Thanks, Jeff.
Sure.
Next question from Dale Durkholtz. This is for Mark Jekanowski or others on the World Board. I've had a few questions this summer about how analysts at World Board arrive at their average price paid to farmers for new crop years. Is the early forecast model driven? What are the basic inputs? Are current new crop futures prices a part of that mix? I know the old crop comes from monthly ag prices weighted by historical monthly marketings, but I'd like to better understand the new crop method.
Sure. Okay. Thanks for the question, Dale. And yeah, short answer is it's complex. It is model driven. Lots of different inputs, including futures prices and historic marketing weights. And maybe for specifics, if one of the board chairs might want to jump in, Keith or Mike, to say a little bit more about how those early forecasts are arrived at.
Well, you've kind of touched on it. Most of the inputs you mentioned, futures prices, forward cash prices, general supply and demand conditions. We look at cross commodity, prices, but it is, and then consensus within the committee about that. The issue for the past year, which was a little strange, was there was a lot of forward pricing at lower prices into a year where the prices began to rise sharply in January. So we were playing catch up for most of the year as the NASS prices came in. It was the spread between spot and forward pricing was a little bit hard to get a handle on this year. But anyway, Mike, you might have some more things to say about the new crop forecasting.
No, I think you pretty much covered the gambit of it. I would just say too, just to reiterate that that's a marketing weighted price. So the comment is common from outside users. How could your price be this? Well, sometimes we assume a certain level of forward pricing. You have to because Keith uses the example this most recent year. You can have NASS reported prices that vary quite significantly from the spot prices. So some confusion out there as to what exactly that price is. It is a marketing weighted price. So.
All right, next question. Always appreciate Lance's transparency on stat chat around the percentage of farmer surveys return. Speaking of stat chat, it is not exclusively Lance's domain. Travis Averill, chief of our livestock branch, we've also started a series around hog and pig production. And so we expect to have additional stat chats there. So make sure and look Travis up and give him a hard time too. But not a surprise that the numbers are variable at best. Is there any discussion about securing additional funds for more objective yield plots and get that number back to where it was some 5 years ago, given that they've taken on more importance with reduced farmer responses? Lance, I'll let you have a stab at that, and then I might follow up with something.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I guess a couple of things I'll point out. First of all, back when we made the adjustments lower on the objective yield sample sizes, a reminder I'll share is that what we really focused on there was optimizing those sample sizes to maintain our accuracy, in particular at that combined regional level. And so we were able to use considerably fewer samples at that level, and then use all the other pieces of information that we had to help distribute those yields back down to the state level. But in conjunction with that, when we initially made those cuts back in 2019, you'll notice the counts shot back up quite a bit in 2020. So as we were kind of optimizing those sizes, we did have to kind of make an adjustment the following year and bring counts back up about half as much as we had cut them back in 2019, and they've remained stable since then. And so at this point, I think we're pretty stable at the level that we're at. Whether it's objective yield, ag yield, quarterly ag surveys, whatever you want to talk about, obviously more samples are always better. And so we're constantly trying to balance the resources that we have available with, the need for data that we have. And so we're going to continue to monitor the same metrics that we do to control those sample sizes. It's largely driven by those measures of uncertainty, or CVs, those quality methodology and quality measure reports that we've been publishing recently give you some of those hard numbers that show how those are performing over time. And that's some of the same information that we monitor year after year to see where sample sizes need to be adjusted. Sometimes the totals don't change nationally, but where we distribute those counts across states to help balance the performance across those smaller geographic areas as well. But again, short answer is right now, I think we're fairly stable at the level that we're at.
Thanks, Lance. One quick point I'll add is, by the way, I commend to you guys if you're interested in a deeper dive, take a look at those methodology and quality measure reports. Now, in most of them, just for brevity, we usually put in 2 years of performance. That is the measures of uncertainty, or the CVs. But we've went back and we've looked at a longer series and often include in the text there. And you don't really see a trend in the CVs or the uncertainty. Now, in some cases, we've bumped sample size just a little bit, but in terms of a real degradation in response rate, that's not really true. I mean, there has been a trend downward, but we are, I think, generally speaking, are maintaining our performance standards with regard to CVs or uncertainty. So it is something that we're always working at on every survey, and fundamental to having good, strong statistics. This public good is to have good, strong cooperation and engagement of our stakeholders too.
And Joe, I think it's probably worthwhile to point out that we have seen a more of a stabilization in that response rate as of lately too.
Yes, and which is really quite amazing during this pandemic, because some of the tools in our arsenal to get cooperation, being out in front of people face to face and stuff, is sharply curtailed at the moment. But anyway, thanks, Lance. Dan, I'll go to the next question. I think this is some ground that's been plowed before, I believe. But Lance, I'm going to let you have it this one. Has there been any discussion of discontinuing the crop condition rating within the crop progress report? This section of the report is extremely questionable, in air quotes, in how it is reported on a weekly basis and has had a poor track record in regard to yield. Just consider the last 2 years. I've never felt it felt the standard of quality collection that NASS and agencies require. If I cannot have a more consistent data collection system, then I ask if it should not be discontinued.
Yeah, so obviously the short answer would be that no, we don't have any plans to discontinue the condition ratings on a weekly basis. This is a topic that has come up probably every year that I've been a part of a data users meeting. And at the end of the day, what we find on this particular topic is you've got roughly half the people who think it's one of the best things out there, and you have roughly half the people who think it should go away. There doesn't seem to be a lot of middle ground when it comes to condition ratings. And I think that has a lot to do with how you use it. And I always like to tell people that you need to use it for what it is. It's a subjective report of condition based on what people are seeing across the country. It is not an attempt to measure yield. It's simply an attempt to provide a weekly update on what people are seeing in their local areas. The various reporters that we have, they're typically county extension agents, or other individuals similar to that who have an opportunity to either observe crops across their county on a weekly basis or glean information from those that they have contact with on a regular basis throughout the week. And the real strength of the condition ratings and the progress information isn't so much in the actual values themselves, but it's in the comparisons that happen over time, because we use exactly the same procedures week after week, year after year, and in most cases, even the reporters are consistent over time. And so if you're looking at that data, I would strongly encourage that you pay close attention to the comparison aspect of it. And then also I would caution you with trying to make a direct link to yield, because as was pointed out in the question, it doesn't always match up. It's very similar to how I look at the use of satellite information for measuring yield. A lot of times it works really well, and sometimes it doesn't. And it has to do with what you're looking at. The satellites are the same way. It's very vegetative driven. And so it's based on what you see. And as you know, in some years, what things look like and what they really aren't always in sync. You can have beautiful, lush plants. I like to use soybeans as an example, but if there's no pods hiding under those leaves, then a beautiful looking plant's not going to generate a high yield. And I think you can see some of the same challenges if you're only looking at condition ratings when you try to measure yield. So that's a long answer for to say, no, we're not planning to discontinue condition ratings anytime soon.
All right. Next question I want to point at is from Ben Diamond. For the FAS iPad Crop Explorer, are there maps of weather, drought, and soil moisture? Will the data behind the maps be made available in a tabular format? And we'll get Patrick in here, but I just want to throw out a pitch before we go on this, just to share that NASS for major weather events like hurricanes and such has a disaster impact webpage. I'm probably not describing it with the right words. We also have some resources that are cropland data layer, for example, and Marissa can maybe throw a link to that in the chat. So domestically, you may find some of these maps of use as well. So with that, again, the iPad Crop Explorer, Patrick, if you or your team.
Yes, thanks for the question. I understand from my folks that all of the numbers behind the maps and graphics can be viewed in a tabular format that way for Crop Explorer and for Gaddis. But it's a little technical. I'll reserve the right to clarify and add to that answer if necessary in the follow-up. But some of the data in those systems is public already and can be accessed, particularly if people use the Esri program. But I understand that we can, users can look at that data in a tabular format if they'd like through those systems. And we can follow up and add more as necessary in the transcript.
So Mike over at EIA, Sam from Iowa Farm Bureau did have a follow-up. And so what level of strategic importance for the available supply of soybean oil would trigger us to have continued biodiesel soybean oil use and renewable diesel soybean oil use? The changes in demand and available supplies for this area are critical for the oil, meal, whole soybeans, and competitive ag commodities.
Right. So, yeah, I'm definitely aware that this is an area where people want us to start to report some additional detail. In particular, this split between soybean oil and other things consumed for renewable diesel versus biodiesel. And of course, for a number of years we had a set of data that was just for biodiesel, and then starting in 2021. We had a more comprehensive view of that, including both biodiesel and renewable diesel, but the two were combined together. So it gives you a bit of a break in series where, starting in 2021, the number is bigger than it was historically. So unfortunately, you don't have a continuous time series for that biodiesel consumption. So so yes, I'm aware that that's something that people want to see. Initially, our thought was, because we do have to do disclosure control on this. So in other words, if we have a number that is only one company or two companies, and I'm not really an expert on all the details of the disclosure control, but basically you're trying to only publish data that has enough people reporting that you can publish it safely without revealing individual data. So initially, the priority was, well, let's get as much of this out as we can. And now, having heard the feedback that, well, we really want to see this continuous data series, I've asked our statistics team to go back and take another look at that and figure out, what it does to disclosure. In other words, how many additional numbers do we have to withhold in order to report that additional detail? And when you report additional detail, you end up having to withhold more numbers because the number of companies gets thinner and thinner as you slice it more finely. In addition, if you have a total, you have to withhold enough data so that you can't back into numbers by subtraction. So anyway, the short answer is yes. We're looking at that, and I want to try to get something out. Certainly in 2022, that's going to have that additional detail. And I guess the only other thing I'll just add is that people may or may not be aware of is, we have the biodiesel consumption, but really we have ethanol, biodiesel, and renewable. Those are the three things we have. The piece that we don't have yet, and that I really want to add, would be to capture the oil refinery part, where oil refineries co-process biomass feedstocks along with petroleum to produce additional renewable diesel. So that's the part I want to add. But 2023 would be the earliest that I might be able to do that. That's when our current surveys are up for renewal.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, and when you publish that additional detail, you can wind up actually maybe causing yourself to not be able to publish a lot of other data as a result. I see Keith Minzy wants in. So Keith, if you want to come off mute, and I don't know if you have a comment or a question for Mike.
Just a comment that as far as the soybean oil balance sheet goes, what we're really concerned about is the total use, not regarding the part. So the information provided by EIA at this point does allow us to provide both forecasts and eventually estimates of how much soybean oil was used for biofuel without regard. I would not want to get to the point where I had the parts but unable to find the total, because it's the total that matters for the soybean oil balance sheet. And we're able to do that with the data that you're currently providing.
So
and I might add, we have, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
We have done a little bit of feathering back based on some estimates that we've made back to about 2017-18 on what we consider to be probably what the level of renewable diesel was to add to our biodiesel based on data from EPA and other sources. So our WASDE soybean oil balance sheet kind of has that built in for some of what Mike was talking about going back a little farther in history. If he does that, we'll actually pick that up and incorporate it.
Right. And if I could just add, initially, again, we started our new, more comprehensive survey of biofuels. And initially, yeah, we had a fairly high level of data reported. But as we get into it, I've asked the team to start looking at, okay, what additional detail can we start to publish, both in the area of feedstocks and also in terms of production. So that's the direction we're headed.
And Mike, I'm sure as we do when we go for a new information request, which requires office management budget approval, you'll be engaging stakeholders in any changes you might make and make sure and get comment on, any changes you might consider to the questionnaire program.
Yes, that's right. We have a whole Federal Register process, and we hold some meetings and different things. And so, yeah, I mean, if people are interested in participating in that, please contact me and we'll get you connected.
This next question is from Ginny. By the way, I noticed that Mike Lynch and his team at AMS have not yet been on the griddle today. So, I can't believe you guys aren't going to throw him a nice hot question. So maybe there's one here in the queue that I haven't seen yet. Is there any plan to change PS&D's granularity of demand to be akin to the WSDA? That is ethanol use and biodiesel use as a separate line item. Patrick?
Thanks, Joe. This one might actually be something that the World Board want to speak to. As far as I know, we don't have plans to try to break out usage for all of the countries in the world for these commodities to that level. But we can't show anything in the PS&D database that's not an official estimate coming out of the ICEC process. So I don't know, Mark, if you want to comment, but I don't see any plans for that from my perspective. But it's probably more up to the World Board.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't think there's any plans, and it's largely, I would assume, a data availability issue. So I'd leave it at that. No plans to be more granular in that data that I'm aware of.
Okay. Well, ask and you shall receive. So the next question I have is for AMS from Evan Brandt. AMS stopped providing dried egg inventories after February 2020. This is a critical piece of the S&D data for price exploration. This became evident when USDA published prices for dry eggs did not move in the March 20 through the July 20 period, when all other ag commodities saw dramatic double-digit declines. At the same time, it was apparent that dryers were working around the clock without the traditional outlets for liquid eggs, food service, schools, etc. But the lack of visibility shielded the realities from the market. Is there any way we can get this data set reported again? Mike?
Thank you, Joe. I was waiting for you to get to that question. Unfortunately, the dried egg industry is become very consolidated. There may be several plants out there doing that work, but there are just few companies. And the information that we collect on a voluntary basis. And one of the larger companies, sometime in the last year or two, when we stopped providing the data, one of the larger companies decided to stop cooperating. And we just don't have enough participation now to reflect the inventories for the industry if the largest provider isn't giving information. And also we get into issues with confidentiality, like I think someone had alluded to before, of if you don't get enough data from enough participants, you could be divulging somebody's inventory or position in the market. So we just have to be very careful about that. So, at this time, unless there's some change of participation or change in, new entries to the industry, I just don't see how we'll be able to pick that up again at this time.
Thanks, Mike. Next question, Chair Goodell. Any potential for faster update of the EIA monthly renewable stats? We just got the July report on 9/30, a 2-month lag. The final month isn't done until it's reported in 25 days. Any help on faster data?
Right. Well, this is actually first time I'm hearing of that one, although, you know, we obviously, and I'm assuming here that we're talking about the actual production of, you know, ethanol, renewable diesel, biodiesel, and we do report on a weekly basis the production of ethanol. And, you know, I mean, that would be something that we could potentially take up when we look at our survey forms again for 2023. But currently I'm not aware of any plans to add those extra biofuels to the weekly report.
Okay. Keith, you want to jump in on this? Maybe some clarification.
Sure. I think the question might be in reference to the lag on release of the feedstocks data.
That's right. I was just going to jump in and say that. I'm pretty sure that's what he was referring to. So as an example, the grain crush for corn, latency is very good on that, right? And then maybe a month later, you get the actual EIA release in your feedstocks. I believe that's what Jerry's referring to. It would be the latency on the feedstock utilization. Am I right, Keith? Am I mischaracterizing that?
That's my expectation about what the question referred to.
Okay,
well, we get
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, that's not something that's on the radar at the moment, but you know, I can take that back and we can look at it.
Okay, and you know, if there's any further clarification, Jerry, maybe check back in the transcript. We'll I'll give Mike a little bit of time to have some conversation too. I need to ask Marissa a question. Marissa, how much time do I have left on the Q&A before we need to go to break?
I've got about 3 minutes left.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, let's by the way, the links to the breakout sessions that'll start at 1:30 are in the chat. So if you're looking for those, they're in the chat now, I believe. All right, Dale Dirkholtz, we're going to go back and pick up. Lance has been questioned and discussed the process of making production revisions for soybeans after the final stocks are reported. That is more straightforward as demand is documented. But with corn, what is the process of making the decision of how much might be a revision to the prior year's crop and how much goes into adjustments on feed and residual? Lance or Dan?
Yeah, so the process itself is the same, but as the question alludes to, the question really becomes, how do you know how much to adjust? With soybeans, it's pretty clear most years, because like this year, you don't want a negative residual, so that makes sense. For corn, it's a little more vague in terms of amount, because we don't know what that feed and residual number is. We don't claim to know what that feed and residual number is, but when we look at a year like this and it becomes fairly apparent to us that before the revisions were made, that residual number was growing much more rapidly than it should based on livestock inventory levels and things of that nature. It prompts us to go back and look at the same data that we look at for soybeans. And so we look at production for corn and say, within the bounds of the data that we have, how much movement could we make in a direction that would help provide what would seem to be a more appropriate or realistic feed and residual number. And so we make the adjustments based on that. And so we don't have a targeted amount to move, but rather we have a direction, and then we evaluate the production number as well as that ending stocks number before we publish it, and make adjustments to both pieces to best fit all the data that we have and provide the best overall picture.
There's a question out about moving release times, and we've talked about that in previous meetings. So I'm going to hop over that. We will provide an answer in the transcript. I want to jump down and pick up one more AMS question since here, this is from Matt Clark. Any chance that AMS will get the weekly feedstuff reports and national daily, I believe, ethanol report, SJ_, GR113 into a format that can be pulled via an API? Mike?
Yes, thank you for that question. I'm actually going to defer to Jason Carwall, who's managing our development there, and he can answer that question.
Sure, thanks, Mike. Yeah, we are very close to releasing all those reports into the new system, so they're available through the API. I believe the plan for feedstuffs is mid-November, and as soon as that's out, the bioenergy will follow closely behind. We've been finishing the co-products reports that tie all that data together. Has been the delay on that one, but should be by the end of the year, all of that should be available.
Okay, well, I think we should probably bring the Q&A to an end here. I've got a couple of quick comments, so I want to make sure I say a thank you first to all of our panelists and the staff that addressed questions today and providing some great breakout sessions. We've got some great breakout sessions to go. So you'll be able to stay around and enjoy those. We will record all the breakout sessions. So if you're out, you can always catch the code on the recording if you wish. The links are provided in the chat. We'll hold them in 1 minute or so after I conclude my remarks, just so you can grab those. They're also in your registration email. So anyway, we want to make sure and thank all of our attendees. You're important to us. We value All right, well, I don't know what that was about, but I'm back. So I don't know if you all can hear me now. I hope so. Yes, okay, I'm back. Good. Well, I was down to the most important part. I wanted to thank our organizers and planners. I wanted to thank Marissa, Vincent, and Patricia, all important to getting us organized and getting all the materials out and such. So I want to thank her for the book together with registration. As I say this, but I truly mean it. I hope you understand how important it is to us to get farmer ranchers to report to us here. We've got to go out and make our case every day for folks to mention. Well, it looks like we're back for a moment. Basically, I just want to thank everybody for attending, and we'll see you at the breakout sessions at 1:30. So if you're still with us, I hope you've picked up the link, and we will see you in the breakout sessions. Thank you so much.